Kick us off, Erin. What are you building?
I'm Erin. I'm the founder of Softside.
I'm developing the system called Kinetic Intelligence Network.
We develop a AI-enabled energy management system.
I want to hear a more energizing story.
Artists don't want to be the bad guy, and that's what they are right now.
This deepfake thing is really interesting.
I don't know who's going to give me money first.
For every investment a VC makes, it's going to be 100 companies that they meet at least
Right.
to decide one. So it's saying, okay, why is this worth another conversation?
Welcome to the offices of Free Agency. If you haven't been here before, but to the feedback loop. Again, my name is Sherveen Mashayekhi. I'm the founder and CEO of Free Agency. If you haven't heard of us from before, we are a venture-backed startup ourselves. We provide Hollywood-style representation to tech talent. Think of it like a career and job search platform for individuals within tech. But beyond that, we host a bunch of shows and initiatives like the feedback loop to support the New York tech ecosystem, the tech ecosystem, and founders more broadly. And the feedback loop has been an awesome initiative in that aspect. Every week, we have a batch of startup founders who get up on stage and give the 1-minute pitch for what they're trying to build, their vision of the future. And then we give them feedback on their storytelling, on their concept, with the intention to say, even the best of founders can really be held back by their ability to raise money, to sell their product, to recruit a team through that core pitch, through that, not the thing with the deck, not necessarily their landing page, but instead their ability, even in an elevator, to have a very simple conversation about what they're building. So that's the attention behind it. And every week I get to welcome a rotating seat of guest venture investor to give that feedback alongside me. And I'm super excited to welcome my good friend Mike MacCombie for his second time on stage. Welcome back.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good to be back.
And the feedback from last time, thinking about the feedback loop, was very positive about your feedback. So well done.
I'm glad I didn't mess up. Cool.
So, Mike, let's do as we always do before we get to the founders. Just a quick intro from you. You're well known inside the inside of tech in New York, I would say. But for those in the crowd and online who aren't as familiar quite yet with you,
Cool.
Who are you?
Hey, everybody. My name is Mike MacCombie. I am somebody who did not expect to be in venture capital. My first career, I was a teacher. My second career, I was a behavior science consultant. And then I got into VC about 7 years ago. I'm the son of psychologists. I've always been a geek about how the brain works, how society works, and all that. I like companies that make sense for how we behave. So companies that are very clear in their story, very sticky in their product, really high distribution leverage, and a business model that does not cause a bunch of attrition and churn when you charge. It means I'm investing in boring companies you probably have never heard of, but I kind of like it that way.
That's awesome. That's appreciated every time from the founder side of the equation. So kudos to you there. Are you ready to give some founders some feedback?
I'm as ready as I will be.
Let's all welcome the first one up. First founder, come on up. What's your name?
I'm Erin.
Erin.
Hey,
Nice to meet you.
Guys.
Are you ready to tell us what you're building, get some feedback?
Yes, I'm ready.
Kick us off, Erin. What are you building?
I'm Erin. I'm the founder of Softside. Did you know that for every $1 million that music artists make in merch sales, that anywhere from 20 to 50K is spent on cease and desist to pull down bootleg or unofficial merch listings? So think Etsy, Amazon, Redbubble, the list goes on. At Softside, we connect music artists with their creative fans through officially licensed fan design merch partnerships. So I come from a talent agency background where I booked more than 10,000 concerts for a roster of more than 75 music artists. And I know that our artists love the designs that their fans are making, but they didn't have the bandwidth or the resources to allow it to exist officially. At Softside, we enable quick IP licensing, creative approvals by the music artists, and revenue sharing between both the music artists and their fans. We sold more than 500 units during our POC, and now we're looking forward to launching our beta this upcoming fall.
All right, under a minute. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So my first question goes to, on the venture side, we're looking for companies that every company you invest in ideally can return the entire fund we're going at. So what I'm curious about is, you said you sold 500 units. Can you talk to me a little bit about the business model of how much you're taking from a partnership? If there's merchandise sold, what's the business model generally, and what does it look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So for our music artists, they make 70% on the net of the sales. So that's taking out the production costs from the retail and the shipping. And so the fans make a guaranteed 15% on the net, and Softside takes 15. We say minimum because we empower the music artists to up their increase if they want. So for an artist like Billie Eilish, 15% on the net could be very generous. For a local band, they might want to go 50-50 with their fans. But Softside does take that 15%. And in addition, we'll be introducing subscription models and up services as well.
Okay.
I'm curious, this makes a tremendous amount of sense to me because from that artist perspective, you want to embrace like the upside of your community and your fans. And this feels like a place where you can't embrace that upside without feeling like there's a downside. So I love that aspect of encouraging something that currently I can't imagine another way this is encouraged. Right. I am curious about the literal interaction though. So, what sort of controls, what sort of, I can imagine someone feeling, I don't know if this is how your product works, but if you're trying to facilitate fan-created merchandise and an artist doesn't want to, is that a negative interaction? Talk about the insides.
Sure, yeah, so you're spot on that artists don't want to be the bad guy, and that's what they are right now when they have to pull down these fan shops. So right now it's looking bad that if they ignore it, there's money left on the table, but if they pull it down, they look bad. So a lot of times they just ignore it altogether. So this gives the opportunity for it to allow officially in the artist control. So they control what IP they're uploading, meaning what IP that the fans can interact with, logos, photos. They're saying, don't go on Google and take a photo of us that we don't own the rights to. Use these designs within your merch templates, and we also fully approve everything on the platform. So on Etsy, you don't get that stamp of approval that we get. So we're saying the artist is fully endorsing it, everything's approved, you won't go through the legal issues, and then it's listed in our platform. But then to hit on your point of if an artist, for example, doesn't like the design, they don't have to approve it, but we can match that fan with similar artists on the platforms, perhaps a smaller artist that doesn't have enough submissions, so it could be a win-win for both the band and for the fan.
I'm sure this can change over time, but do you currently tell them the reason that they've been rejected?
No, but we do have edit requests. So if an artist is like, love the design, my face looks a little weird in this illustration, can you fix this? The fan can then fix it. So we treat it like a proper creative work for hire. But that being said, we do max it to 5 edit requests so that the fan is not taken advantage of and we're not going through 40 rounds of edits.
Free work.
Yeah.
And then from that perspective, I'm curious, I can imagine from a platform play, you want this all to happen on, what was the name of the company again?
Softside.
Softside, as a platform and a company for your take rate, but then e-commerce integrations, fan side integrations, where does that go over time?
Sorry, can you clarify one more time?
Like, would you allow an artist to put it on their Shopify platform, or if they have their own, I don't know what else they use?
Sure. Yes, no, exactly. So right now, during our beta, it will just be on the soft side. We will be integrating with artist websites at some point. The goal is discovery. So right now, artist merch exists in many different marketplaces, but they're really only monetizing in their store. So we're saying you should be able to monetize it in other places. So the fan merch should exist on your official platform. We'll handle all the back end. It should also be on ours because we'll have the power of community. We'll have multiple
But it
artists
can't
on
exist
here.
in someone else's back end.
No, not yet. And so right now we're not having it a
That does feel
free-for-all
like a big
Etsy
challenge.
because
Right. Well, I guess I think less about Etsy and more about like if I am using, again, I don't know that they use Shopify, but if I'm using Shopify and I can't integrate your items.
as a music artist you can, the fan can't. If that's your,
Oh, I
so
see.
yeah, so the music artist
So
can
I can
have
decide
it.
basically to lift it into my platform
Yep, so you
or
can have
leave
it on
it
your
over there.
platform. And so if the sale will just be handled through Softside, but we could integrate it onto the artist websites in addition to being listed on Softside's platform. They can also take it offline. So if there's a bestseller, for example, we can negotiate the terms for them to bring it on tour. So now you're seeing fan design merch on every stop of a tour.
What do you think?
It's interesting. I'm wondering where the two things comes out is one, how are you reaching the individual fans? Are you just trying to find the artist and the artist put out to their fans? Or I know you come from a background in the agency world.
Yeah.
What's your view on getting artists on? Where do you feel like there's progress to be? What do you think are the biggest challenges of getting both sides onto the platform?
Yeah, so originally we worked with 5 emerging artists. We just had a very basic requirement that they had to put it on their social media once, and that's how we naturally started getting their fans to come to us. Now we found fans just found us on their own, mostly Taylor Swift fans. They've been really nuts about it, which has been exciting. But so we do have some of those social requirements just during the beta. Once we're fully in launch, music artists do not need to do that anymore. But yes, from working at agencies, I've just had conversations with different artists of very large calibers who say that they have this issue and they don't know what to do with it other than that bad guy scenario. So right now we're just going to do invite only, kind of test out different features and then do a full launch later on.
Cool.
From a pitch perspective, I have 2 core things I think of as maybe the modifiers here, the feedback, because I like the concept a lot.
Yeah.
And we hear a lot of artists and music pitches because I think a lot of founders get excited about that sector.
Yeah.
This is the first one I actually think can work as a business. If any of the other ones hear that, I'm sorry.
They can edit that out.
I always do this when you're on stage. I make the mistakes in front of people's feelings.
Yeah.
But there are 2 things that I would most change. First, as you talked about the idea of, kind of the fan not being as harmed and kind of the artist being able to lift them and all of those elements. I think that should actually be a narrative in your, whether it's a 60-second pitch, whether it's the early portion of a deck, in a little bit more of a strong manner, because I think one of the things I default thought is, oh, another merchandise creation platform, another platform where people are creating apparel or memorabilia. That's really challenging, obviously, from an economic perspective. But if you then tell me, and you have this perspective as a talent agent, you have to understand how many no's we send, how many we regret sending when fans do create compelling merchandise, and we're creating this new thing that an artist currently cannot do unless they have their talent agent reach out to that person, bring them to their city, meet them, and decide, hey, you're a part of my team. Meet the rest of my teams for manufacturing. Like, there's a lot you're shortcutting there that I didn't hear until we're about midway in the conversation. It's one change that I would recommend. The other change, and we haven't really gotten to this other than you mentioning Taylor Swift a few times, is like the scale of this is always really difficult for investors to understand. I think unless someone is fascinated by music and wants to engage. I can already imagine, though, that this applies. Actually, we didn't ask this. I'll leave it as a small open question. This applies outside of music.
Oh, that's a goal. Yeah. I mean, I think we can just make a flywheel of different verticals with it. Like, we've had an increased interest in sports, college. You know, there's just a big space where people are creating their own designs and they don't know where to put it. They know that if they list it on Redbubble or on their own Shopify site.
Why is this not now that you said that, I'm like more excited. Why has this not been made before?
Well, I think it's just the logistic of it is hard, because when we've talked to young fans, they're like 18-year-old people who make designs. They don't want to be on a legal email with people handling licensing because they don't know how to protect themselves. So if someone reaches out to them, they would rather say, I have a Softside account. Let's handle it there. All the terms are taken care of.
There's something interesting here around like the fact you're almost like a service as a product that I think I almost want to hear more about again in the early portion of your pitch to get me excited to realize the why it hasn't been done before. Is the exact thing you just described does sound painful and does sound why this isn't happening at scale. And artists do it on their own. Casey Musgraves did it. She released fan-made merch, but then the comments were, how can I do this? So there's a scaling problem. Super interesting.
So the one piece of feedback I give is, I think, especially when it's markets that seem like they have a certain level of scale, is showing, hey, we start here, we export to the next scale, we export to the next scale. I think if you had led with that in like the last 5 seconds of your pitch, saying, you're probably gonna have a percentage of people that would normally say, music tech, I don't know, kind of sort of, and you can get their at least ears perked enough for them to come back and say, oh, NIL, when we're looking at athletics, when we're looking at entertainment, we're looking at all those things. If this goes on like the Marvel side, if like any other sort of media property, it goes in that way. And that opens up a whole different viewpoint of the scale of it. So I think just forgetting, how do I get a key sort of heuristic, I think, is how do you get the investor more interested with every sentence? And I think ending with that one is where you go from, oh, that was a nice company I heard, to saying, oh,
this is just step one.
We should probably talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah. There's so much more ahead than there is in the early days. Well done. Thanks, Sarah.
Well, thank you very much
Thank
for
you so
your
much.
time. Thank you both of you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Mike, what do you from a music, let's have this conversation while I adjust myself. From a music perspective, again, I'd say every episode has had somebody come up, every session, talking about artists have sync rights. And I learned what that means, which is like when you want your song to be in a commercial, and then artists have communities that they want to monetize better. How many of these things do you see? What is your skepticism around them?
So I've looked at a lot of music tech deals. I think a lot of them go to the right side. I think I just generally say, I need to understand a very clear reason why this is a value prop different from marginal improvements from every other company we've seen.
Right.
I think this one is actually a specific workflow with a specific revenue channel, where when we think about the percentage of money made from merch, especially for musical artists, it's high. And so if we can take a percentage of that, this tells me more like a workflow.
I actually think, though, too, to me, what I got excited about, she's creating net new for the artists.
It's net new revenue rather than optimizing something that's already slightly perfect. So what I'll do is I'll follow up with her. I actually probably know some investors in a media entertainment investor group that I have, or they might want to take a look at that.
Fantastic. Love it. All right. Shall we welcome the next founder to stage?
Cool.
All right, everyone, let's welcome the next founder. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. What's your name?
My name is Jiwon Chung.
Jiwon, are you ready to tell us what you're building and get some feedback?
Ooh, I'm a little nervous. Okay.
Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you.
We're all rooting for you.
So, hello, my name is Jiwon Chung, and I'm developing the system called Kinetic Intelligence Network. It's a computer vision technology that is designed to help us better understand the human body movement. So it's an algorithm that analyzes our movement, and so it can detect something small from little joint misalignment or muscular imbalance, and it can also detect signs of tendonitis, arthritis, and which can impact in preventing further complications down the road. So naturally, this algorithm can also provide treatment plans and personalized recovery plan. So that's what I'm working. But more importantly, this algorithm can provide a layer of security for individuals on to protect their online presence by offering defense against deepfakes.
That's a minute. That got interesting at the end. Let's give you a round of applause. You got through.
I think I got
Where were
keywords
we
in.
going at the end there? That seemed different than the rest.
Deepfakes by
Oh, interesting. I realized. Go ahead.
by providing a unique
Cool.
signature, unique movement signature that is assigned to individuals. So that is what I'm working on.
That's super interesting.
Cool.
My skepticism as to your hard left turn at the end has turned into excitement about it. But
I know.
it does bring me to I'll start with some pitch feedback. I think we went through a journey. And that journey from a product perspective, user experience perspective, just wasn't clear. I think your product is this algorithm, right? And there is a way to take something where maybe you haven't figured out all the use cases and all of the ways in which you'll package it. There's still a way to pitch that is sequential, chronological, and will make sense to someone who's not heard about it before. So we'll talk through that. But that's the main feedback I'd give you is I had to really lock in to get some of that. And then even thinking to what you'll get to again, the algorithm is the innovation, and so there's more that you can do there. But before we kind of get to it, I'll let Mike kick off questions and feedback.
So definitely this is a technological problem. So one thing I'd say in the pitch is leading with the proof points of your background, your context, what sort of got you to the context for saying, I'm building that.
Okay.
So if you are somebody who's done a master's degree in computer vision versus I had an idea and I've brought on some engineers who do it, finding out where the proof points are of, okay, believing the tech efficacy first, and then getting to that, and we can get to the other points after. But that was the first question.
Yeah.
I was curious about.
Fair. Would you be interested in hearing it?
Oh, Mike,
Yes.
yeah, tell us.
So I actually studied finance in undergrad, and senior year I decided to be a ballerina. With no previous sports experience or dance experience. And guess what? I've made marks. But the thing is, I was trying to solve a different problem, and I was not going on a performance aspect, but more on the hitting the right coordination, or basically healing through movement. So along the way, as I got credentials as an educator with American Ballet Theatre and dancing in European National Ballet companies, well, not full-time, but so my peers are dancing in Paris Opera and American Ballet Theatre, rising ranks now, amazing. So, but anyways, along the way, I learned that certain coordinations or movements have possibilities to address our psychological problems like PTSD. And there are now researches that are done to veterinarians or veterans that fought in wars that, for example, if you reestablish your eye coordination, it helps for alleviating or addressing such psychological problems. And guess what? Classical dance is all about coordination. So I thought, hey, what if I can, is there any way to bridge this? Maybe.
Can I pause this for a sec?
Yeah.
We're learning way too much as we go.
I know, exactly.
Yeah.
So
And
it's, yeah.
So one of the things that I think I often tell people, whether in the context of a founder pitch or in the free agency's context, job searchers, you want to give me enough upfront context that I'm dangerous in listening to the rest of your story. Yeah. And you're doing the exact opposite. You're backloading everything interesting, and you're telling us about this ballet thing.
Ooh la la,
Then we
yeah.
learn later on, it wasn't just that you decided to do ballet, you became an instructor and you became important and prominent in that world. So suddenly, I'm not knowing in those moments why you told me the thing before until, and I have to backtrack. Oh, now that ballet story seems more important. There's something more interesting. By front loading some of that important context and making me dangerous, then when you're bringing me along, I go, oh, now I'm into a lot of these things. But let me pause on a different track. What is the algorithm today? Have you built it? Do you have a prototype? Is it a concept?
I'm still building it.
You're still building it. And what's your understanding? This is a weird question to ask a founder, but I think an important one. Is it something you're definitely going to build and it will work in the ways that you expect, or you're still in kind of I think this is how the algorithm can work, and actually the startup's first 2 years is going to be validating it?
You know what? I don't know who's gonna give me money first? But I'm positive in my vision.
And do you have a technologist that you've partnered with to build it?
I'm working with the machine learning specialist at the moment. So
Got it.
So generally, my view is I've met some folks who are building out platforms and ideas. And I think the biggest transition to make is going from I have an idea for a product that really I believe has efficacy as a product, and then going over to I have an idea for a business that makes use of the product to build a self-sustaining. And I think 2021 ideas compared to 2024, it's a very different change of somebody back in the day when interest rates and the stock market and all the contexts are a little bit different. You say, okay, I'm curious, I can find out. Speaking from the perspective of a very financially conservative investor, like I'm looking for very high revenue, very clear demands from customers. And so depending on who you meet, you might meet an angel investor. I've heard of some who be like, we're going to put money in, we're going to do the thing and figure it out, to tell me the business, how do we get to the proof point of that? On the investor side of angels who want to make a profit, or
even just the user experience of it. That's the other thing, right? I think like, you know, if you don't get to business model because you are a little bit more uncertain, I would want to hear, hey, we're building an algorithm that will allow us to track movement in a way that's never been tracked before. What you have to understand about tracking movement in a way that hasn't before is it unlocks these 4 things: healing, performance, the really important deep fake and identity concept that we still haven't talked a lot about, but is super intriguing.
it is.
I don't know what number 4 is. I don't know why I picked 4. Rule of 3 worked out there. You know, that chronology and getting to these are the use cases and unlocks. Here's my first experiment. I'm going to start with XYZ exercise use case with this algorithm as a validation. Or maybe you would have said, we've been really excited by what we've been hearing on the deepfake side, so actually we're planning to start there. But if that's the story you tell instead, you can still get into the rest of the exploration with an investor as time passes, but you need that setting. Let's ask one more question.
I was say, and if you don't have an idea of the answers, figure out the questions you want to ask, saying, here are the next 5 hypotheses that I'm testing out. That's another way of going about it.
Yeah. This deepfake thing is really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So using body signatures essentially and creating some sort of like identity out of it. How real is that to you? Is that like just a realization you had that you are, you know, wanting to jump into the zeitgeist of it all? Or is this something that you could get passionate about building? Where does that concept sit for you?
To be honest, I guess the security identity part did come along later as I was talking to somebody in the development sector. And I realized, you know what, with the parameters I have in mind, it could be possible. So
could be, right? The challenge would be like,
actually
are the models better?
It, of course.
But, and are the deepfake models better at like mimicking those signatures over time in a way that would allow the detection to continue to?
Well, it's like fingerprints. I mean, yeah, maybe you could try to imitate it, but if the parameters are hundreds and
the challenge being, I assume, and again, I don't live in the weeds of this, is like they use those same parameters to build, you know, kind of the imitation of you. I don't know. It's really interesting. Anyway, thank you for sharing, and good luck on navigating the maze.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
It's super hard when you're this early to communicate in a way that I think isn't revealing of your own uncertainty, right? And I think that's part of it is this is someone who's clearly like discovering the early portion of what their product could be. What's the earliest thing you've invested in and the story that you heard in that moment?
So I invested at the very initial stages of a company that was in the customer success space. So finding clearer version of how do you get customer feedback and advice instead of going through phone trees or instead of going through extensive chats. It was pre-product, pre-build, but it came from 2 founders, one of whom was a domain expert and had led leadership teams at multiple unicorn companies. So I said, okay, this was a bet early on. Founder had an experience with it, and I said it was a reasonable one to make. Typically, that's the earliest I've gone. Most of the times,
credentials there did a lot for you.
I need to have the founder either have an insight on the customer demand or have demonstrated customer demand. If it's somebody who's like a former consultant or MBA grad who says, I think this will be important, but they have no reason to say, I actually know they will say yes, or I've seen the problem myself, it's much harder to be convicted. So I just say bottoms up expertise. If like you've done it yourself or you know people have done it and you know the lived experience.
Yeah, because I think ultimately we're looking for when you can't wait for them to go through some of that journey on their own is enough of the same intuition that causes them to start the company, which is hard because obviously you're not as passionate about the problem, whatever else it might be, but you can get passionate about that person's approach. And that's the thing a credential reveals or early customer data reveals and can be the proxy for traction when you have it. With that in mind, shall we welcome the third founder up?
Cool.
Round of applause. Third founder. How you doing?
Hey.
Good. A little bit nervous.
A little
but,
bit nervous. It's a little
yeah.
warm in here too.
Sweet. Yeah.
So
Sweet.
we're on your side. We're supporting you. Let's give this one a round of applause too. Now that I've made that thing. What's your name?
It's Raphael, and I'm already very sorry
Oh,
for that German accent that might come.
what is
up.
the accent again?
A German accent.
Raphael, though you said your name
Right.
is.
Yeah.
No worries. You sound like you're gonna breeze right through it. Ready? As ready as you'll be.
Ready. Yeah.
Go for it. What are you building?
Sweet. Yeah, 99% of all 24 million companies in Europe are small and medium-sized enterprises. All of them has basically experienced a raise in costs of energy, and little of them knew how to reduce them and bring them down. This is a 32 billion opportunity only in Europe, and we develop a AI-enabled energy management system tailored for SMEs to reduce their cost, comply with regulations, and enable new revenue streams for them. Unlike our competitors, we have software and intelligence. We add connectivity and the right hardware to then have an integrated solution at a tenth of the cost of our competitors. Our team pretty much diverse of business individuals and techies, and yeah, we are here to go the next step. We have different pilot customers, hotels, and manufacturing sites, and we're now about to commercialize our first product.
Awesome. Well done, Raphael. Good
Thank
job. I like the fact that you're German because I believe this is a huge problem in Germany, right? The energy crisis.
It is huge.
Is this
yeah.
something that you've tracked in the news over the past couple of years?
I haven't caught a lot. I was in Berlin in January randomly.
Oh,
so
there we go. So,
bit.
you know, I know this story so superficially, so help me out here. But like my understanding is, and this is somewhat pitch feedback, I would actually have used this a little bit as a jumping off point. Germany in particular has had like near crises over the past couple of years. Educate us.
Yeah, I mean, now with the Ukraine war, right? We had all the Russian gas cut it off, which then had a spike ×5 in energy costs at the peaks, combined with decarbonization efforts all around the world. Also, local law 97 here in New York, big topic. Governments are really pushing everyone to reduce the cost next to having the economic benefits to it, right? Now, yeah, but I mean, all the SMEs, they are lacking of resources to do so. They're already lacking of resources. They don't have the financial and the human resources to educate themselves, and this is where we basically step in to provide a solution.
And are SMEs really trying? Are they incentivized to tackle this in
economically? Yeah,
Okay.
that's one thing. Then you have regulations tying up. So if you do
I
not,
guess you're saying it's such a big economic problem, and that might not be something I feel as much here, but they're feeling
right
in their bottom line.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So I got the general sense of, at an abstract level, what you're doing. There's three things that concretely I was just wanting to say, what does this look like at the ground level? One, the actual product. You mentioned there's an integration and a holistic approach. I wondered what that actually looks like. And then I'll just give you a heads up on the other two. One was you mentioned additional revenue streams. What does that look like? And the third, giving me a sense of the compliance framework that they're operating against. So what do we actually have? What is actually the revenue generated? And what's the background behind it? Those three, I was just saying, would love to get specifics on what those were.
On the first one, on how the offering looks like, we do an assessment of the building. We check out, do you have Wi-Fi? Do we need to install gateways? And which hardware do we have to install to then capture data, which is fueling our platform. We bring the data on the platform. We create transparency. When am I using how much energy and for what? My lighting, heavy machines, etc. From there, then we are able to optimize incrementally by knowing, okay, in 2 hours, the sun comes out, the building as such is a thermal storage, so we can decrease the HVAC, the heating, for example, or there's no one in the building, so we can turn off certain machines or equipment. Second, on the regulations, Europe wants to go net zero by 2050. Depends on the country earlier. Yeah, even though a little bit earlier. This means either you have completely green energy, which our grids are just not meant to hold that. So we have during the day, for example, a lot of renewable energy within the grid, which led the prices to drop. So here we are stepping in and we can say, hey, if you load your EVs or your battery throughout the day, you get even paid to do so. So you do not pay for the energy, but they pay you. So this is how we generate new revenue, additional revenue for those companies. It's basically providing flexibility services to grid operators. That was the second one. The third one?
We talked about product, we talked about revenue and compliance. Yeah.
And compliance, yeah. So net zero by 2050. Starting from next year on, every commercial building has to reduce their energy, has to increase their energy efficiency by a certain percentage. It depends on which tier you are in. If you don't hit that, you have to pay a fine. The same you have also here in New York. It's $240 per ton of CO2. It's also like, yeah.
So I think I'm going to pause here for some feedback. I want to hear a more energizing story.
Yeah.
And I think the way you get to that is to get to the bottom line of some of Mike's questions around the impact here. Like, you used a lot of setup and you continue to kind of refer to what is virtuous, which is there's regulation coming, there's compliance, there's good reason for this too. But this is where the mission is somewhat overwhelming the pitch, and I don't want that to happen for you. And so instead, what I recommend is give that context up front of what's happening in Europe, why it matters, what the regulation is. That's 20 seconds, or again, in the context of DEC, that's a slide or two. But then it's the punchiness of, okay, the problem for SMEs is they actually don't have the tools to be able to track and proactively get ahead of their usage, which then impacts their bottom line. Not only, by the way, in Europe, but also in the US, but in Europe, it's a huge problem across the board. So what we're doing is we're going to each location and we're putting in a bunch of IoT devices. And I know you said there's gateways. That decision sounds like a post. What you're saying is we're putting in a bunch of IoT devices to give them the intelligence, the data, but then also begin to track and understand their usage to make concrete recommendations, which then we can sell them products to install to get more green. We can sell them arbitrage on energy. I'm sure you can do something like that. I'm sure there's so many startups that do in the US, like, will help you install in your home solar panels and then do like a weird VIG on your energy bills for the next 10 years, or like home financing. There's so much that enables. But to get to the point where I think you say, we're going to install some stuff that lets us track some stuff, that lets us use AI to also make recommendations on that stuff, that's the juice. And we're so not talking about that because you're not talking about that. Make that 90% of what you talk about, where 10% is a supporting argument. I think that's the weight, the density of your conversation. Make it more about that product.
Yeah, I would say sticking to the basics and the premise of saying, hey, right now SMEs in Europe cannot track their energy against compliance frameworks, and they're not having a way of optimizing something that constitutes blank percentage of their cost. Going into the platform and then going to that, I think it allows you to get a little bit more holistic survey of each part of the pitch, as opposed to here's a big situation, let's go in for that. So I think it was just a balancing the pitch out of problem, solution, going to the product, going to the outcome, rather than.
And the reason for this, Mike said this really well, and the reason is because then you're proving that you can solve it. That's one of the things that we didn't get a lot in kind of the conversation because we were so much in the problem and his questions about compliance and regulation. I want that to be a small part. Then I want you to tell me your solution to that problem. Then we can talk more about whether the problem is real, how big it is, what the addressable market of that problem is. But first, I also want to know, what devices are you installing? Is AI really a part of this when it comes to optimization, or is it mostly like a hand wavy portion of it, which is fine? What does it look like to actually get this into SMEs in Europe in terms of like the physicality of it? There's distribution problems to something like this. So again, if we lived more in that to say, oh, he can definitely go do all of these things. Now let's talk about how big the market is. It's probably a better pattern for you. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I want to talk about, kind of the sequencing of these pitches a little bit with you. The thing that I get concerned about when I hear something where I'm still looking for the product user experience, which is why I encourage so many founders, if anyone's been to multiple of these episodes. How many people have been to the feedback loop before, by the way? Wow, mostly newcomers.
Isn't that new?
How many people have been to the feedback loop, to the show? I love it. Love it. Mostly newcomers. My broken record is, tell me about the user experience. Tell me about the journey. Talk to me about the innards of using the product. And The reason for that in a lot of cases is because if we're too much stuck in the problem, I might believe you, I might think it's interesting, but I still don't know what you're doing about it, and I still don't know how compelling your solution is versus someone else's solution. So I can walk away almost like having had a good conversation intellectually, but not necessarily believing that like my money needs to go to you for you to be the one to either solve the problem or make me money.
For every investment a VC makes, it's going to be 100 companies that they meet at least
Right.
to decide one. So it's saying, okay, why is this worth another conversation?
Totally.